we're doing these series of episodes and interviews to understand what's really going on behind the buyer's eyes and mind. How do the things that we do as salespeople influence their buying decisions? How does it impact even the perception of sales? And so I spend probably too much time going on Google and LinkedIn and searching for bad buying experiences. And that's how I came across our guest today, Jeff Peterson. He is the sales manager at Spin Linen Management. And he had written an article about a selling or a buying experience that he had that I'm sure that we can all relate to. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on, Carole. Pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about this buying experience that you had. What is it that you were trying to purchase?
Sure. At risk of being a total cliche, I was trying to buy a car, which I think, frankly, has led to many unpleasurable buying experiences. But mine was no different. And like you mentioned, as somebody who's in sales, you're always thinking about what could have gone different, better in my own job. And so when I'm in a buying scenario, I tend to think what would have made my buying experience better as well. So that's really where the article came from.
Yeah. And we've all had that experience, right? In trying to buy a car. I have one that I wrote about in my book. I call it, it's my job to move metal. And the thing is that sales has changed so much and buying has changed so much. But here is an industry that has not changed a lot about how they do things. And while we work in B2B or in B2B spaces where we're selling at a professional level, we often, I think, discredit or don't give enough influence to how our own personal buying experiences in our personal lives influences not only our perception of sales, but also how we view salespeople in our professional part. So let's dig into a little bit more about your buying experience for this car. How did you go about your process? What were the first steps that you took in trying to decide what you wanted to get?
Sure. Like many buyers these days, right? It started with the internet and just doing a little bit of research. And since this was a company vehicle, I was given a budget to adhere to, which again, I think a lot of buyers have in common, right? You start with, okay, what's the maximum I'm going to spend? What are the features and benefits that are important to me? And I work backwards from there, right? So I said, okay, what vehicles would fit these criteria for the right price? And that sort of led me to narrow in on one or two. And at that point, it wasn't until that point where I'd probably done couple hours, certainly, of research on my own before I even reached out to a potential seller to gauge them. I did my homework, I arrived at my own conclusions. And from there, I was like, okay, it's time to enlist the dealerships to really bring this one home. And that's when chaos ensued.
And this is, again, to the point of how we buy in our personal lives is also how we buy in our professional lives. It influences it. Who has not heard the statistics from Gartner and Forrester and every other analytics company out there that talks about the percentage of people and how far they are in their buying process and how much research that they're doing online before they ever want to engage with a salesperson? So you did your research. You wrote down you knew what it is that you needed. You had your criteria. You had your budget. Then what happened? What was most important to you in this process when you engaged with a salesperson?
I think, and this is where I think my own perception came into play, right? Because considered by the time I had done this research and selected the vehicles that I wanted to drill down on, I'm thinking, okay, at this point, this should be one of the easiest sales that any car dealership would ever have. I know how much money I want to spend, what vehicle I want. I know what features I want in it. I know it's all feasible and doable. Why can't I find somebody just to give it? And so when, being in sales like we are in the B2B space, you're always generally when somebody says, take my money, you take it, right?
Please take my money.
Yeah. So when you don't have that experience, you're just, what is happening here? Like, why will somebody not take my money? So anyway, I reached out to, no exaggeration, 10 or 11 different dealerships. That was the other, I guess, democratizing force in all this is that the internet has really allowed us to cast a wider net. And certainly in my time in sales and with my experience, which is about 15 years, I feel like has become a much more of a thing. The buyers are just more educated now. And I see that all the time in my world. And I felt like I was one of those educated buyers. So really at that point, it was just about how is somebody going to take my money? And when nobody would, I was like, man, this is a really flawed selling model. And and then you start wondering, what would you do better? What would you do differently? So I just wrote my article based on that, like some of my own conclusions.
So how did it actually go? You said that they wouldn't take your money, but what went down?
Yeah, any number of things, from being just completely ghosted when I've filled out an online submission, right? Not contacted at all, which obviously you're not going to get a sale if you don't
Oh,
reach
right.
out to prospect or engage with them. That was strike 1 and 2 for a couple of places. Certain places misrepresented pricing a lot and tried to do a lot of deceptive things, tacked on surcharges, said things were mandatory at their specific dealership. And when I questioned why, they couldn't really explain that. Just stupid car dealership fees like the rust protection and the dashboard. Yeah, I don't know. They put the dashboard protectant on there to stop it from ever cracking or whatever. Just a lot of ticky-tack surcharges and stuff like that. And then treating me when I had expressed that this is a company vehicle, and they acted like they weren't even listening to what purpose I was going to use it for. So they were talking about features and benefits that might have appealed to somebody who was going to be lugging around a lot of kids or things like that, or they just weren't listening to the kind of buyer I was. I said, I don't really need a lot of that stuff. I just need this specific set of criteria here. And then they wouldn't give it to me. And then the pricing was insanely frustrating I gave them my budget, and then a couple of them would just come in $5,000 over at it. And I'm like, guys, if you can't do it, just say you can't. I'm actually like, and I teach my sales reps this too. If we can't make a deal at the price a buyer's requesting, let's be transparent about it. That credibility and that honesty and that integrity that'll pay dividends in some fashion. And this industry on the whole doesn't seem like they really grasp that concept. So it was a litany of things, but just overall, just not listening to the buyer, not empathizing, not selling at a high trust level. It was mostly those were like the macro symptoms.
And how is it that you can actually trust someone if they won't even listen to you?
Yeah. And then, they clearly put them and their company's best interests over mine, which I get it. Everybody it has to be a mutually beneficial transaction. I understand that. I sell myself, so I get it. You can't enter into deals that are unfavorable. But I think in that scenario, when the worst thing you can do is misrepresent what, your intent is and what you're selling. So when you counter that, it's definitely a turnoff. It doesn't make you feel listened to. It doesn't make you feel like you can trust the person on the other side of the table. And I hate picking on it. I feel bad because I picked the most stereotypical bad experience industry ever that we're talking about here. And I'm sure there are wonderful dealerships that do things the right way all over the country. But this is an industry that generally is notoriously unfavorable in these kinds of situations. And it makes me question the entire model of why they have to sell vehicles this way.
Exactly. And to expand that out, like what the whole model of selling to begin with, because if you've read Daniel Pink's book, To Sell as Human, 7 out of 10 of us associate sales with something negative. And the image that comes to mind is a used car salesman. This is the basis for the perception of sales, unfortunately. And the next part that's most unfortunate about that is that whether you're selling software or linens or anything else, this is the perception that buyers have been bringing into it. And it's only getting reinforced by the interactions that they're having with sellers.
Yeah. And I think that's true. Everybody's bought a car, or most people have. And if they had a negative experience, the next time they're in a sales scenario,
right,
you're going to be countering as a salesperson with a lot of baggage that isn't entirely of your doing. And so it's just another hurdle that we all have to hop over in order to gain trust and earn the buyer's respect and sell things the right way with empathy and trust and the values that we all bring to the table, because sales is an honorable profession when done correctly. And I'm passionate about it. And I don't like to see things and industries and bad faith actors sully the entire industry. It's a huge problem.
Yeah. And if you think about it, I can almost hear in the minds of some B2B SaaS tech salesperson right now saying, there's no way you can compare the type of sale that I do and the strategies and tactics that I use to a used car salesman. So then let me just ask everyone out there who might be listening is, when was the last time a customer said that this is my budget and I can't go over it? And you said, let me go talk to my manager. We've all been guilty of that at some point, whether you're a used car salesman or if you're selling SaaS tech or anything else. And so it permeates inside of the industry.